Good morning on a nice, bright, sunny day from the Gothenburg Water Utilization Learning Center. My name is Brian Olson, and I really want to talk to you this morning about some dryland field research we did on corn in 2019 that is really relevant to what many farmers are doing right now in the field and planting a lot of irrigated corn and maybe moving into dryland corn. There is a lot of field activities going on out in the field right now. Here's the team doing some strip till, but obviously we have strip tilling going on. We have herbicide applications, and again, planting. A lot of corn going in the ground, soybeans going in the ground. But how do we go through there and manage that dryland corn? So here's a visual of what we're looking at with respect to the growing conditions right now across the high plains. You'll see here we've got Kansas, Colorado, and Nebraska, and really there's some different stories with respect to the growing conditions in these three states. If we look at Kansas, really that northwest part of Kansas is in that abnormally dry condition. There's still good subsoil moisture, but the top part of the profile is getting a little drier. Maybe we're a couple inches behind with respect to April for the rainfall we would normally receive. Conditions look a little drier, obviously, out in Colorado, where we're into that severe drought category for a large portion of that Front Range area. And then we look at Nebraska. Most of Nebraska is looking really good with respect to having no drought monitoring rating, except for that very southern tier of counties there that are bordering Kansas. And so, again, farmers need to evaluate really what does that soil profile look like when they're making decisions for dryland corn, and it will be variable as we look across that Central Plains region. And so we tried to do a study in 2019 about what are some management factors that we can evaluate at planting, but then also what are some things that we can do at, let's say, the V8 stage with an additional nitrogen application, or the R1 growth stage with a fungicide application to improve the overall yield potential of our corn after we have already decided on that planting rate. And so this was done at the Learning Center. We planted the corn into wheat stubble, no-till, had 110 relative maturity drought guard corn product, 30-inch row spacing, and fairly wet growing conditions last year. Had a hard freeze on October 10th that ended the growing season. So this gives you an idea of what the actual study looked like. Again, large plot, 410 feet by 20 feet wide. The total acreage for the study was 10 acres. The study was set up as a split plot with fungicide as the whole plot, side dress nitrogen application as a subplot, and then seeding rate as the subplot. So again, we had 39 pounds of nitrogen carryover in the profile, and then we put out nitrogen at 90 pounds over the whole plot, along with 30 pounds of phosphorus and 25 pounds of sulfur on April 23rd of last year. And so if you look at this, you'll notice that we've got seeding rates going from 12 to 30,000, and then we've got another 12 to 30,000 seeding rate, but here we've got the additional 60 pounds of nitrogen. So if you come over here to the far column, you'll notice 129 pounds, and then it goes up to 189 pounds. That accounts for that additional nitrogen applied at the V8 stage. And then you'll also notice that treatments 9 through 16 are the same. They've got the seeding rates by nitrogen, but then these 8 treatments do not have that additional fungicide application. So again, the nitrogen application, the 60 pounds was applied at the V8 with the 360 Y drops, and then the Delaro 325C fungicide treatment was applied at 8 fluid ounces on August 9th at the R1 growth stage. So what was the results? We did see an increasing yield as we increase seeding rate. And so depending on where we're at with respect to the growing conditions, again, in eastern Colorado, farmers are looking at fairly dry conditions, maybe looking at more of that 12,000 seeding rate. But for Nebraska, where we've got good growing conditions right now, we may be looking at more of that 18 to 24. And then for farther east into Kansas and Nebraska, we may be looking at more at that 30,000 potential seeding rate, depending on where you're at in the state for dryland. But what did we actually see out there with respect to what did the ears on 8.5 foot a row look like? And so here's the ears on that 12,000 plants per acre. You can see we had some very large ears with some small secondary ears. Then you move to the 18,000 plants, again, very large ears with no secondary ears. The 24 and 30,000 would be characterized by smaller ears, but again, more ears that are there, and they're very consistent across those seeding rates. And so again, we saw an increase in yield as we increase seeding rate. So depending upon your growing condition, you will decide on what seeding rate looks good for that environment. But what happens if you do get better growing conditions? For example, if you're in eastern Colorado, western Kansas, where you might be only dropping 18,000, let's say you do get better than expected growing conditions. What can you do to increase that yield? Well, you can come back in and look at that V8 application of 60 pounds of nitrogen. We saw a very nice increase in yield across all those seeding rates with that additional nitrogen application. We saw an increase of 11 bushels per acre. Then when we look at the fungicide application, again, crossed all of those seeding rates, we also saw an increase in yield with that fungicide application of 8 bushels per acre. And so again, if the good growing conditions increase or improve, depending upon where you're at in those states, you may look at that fungicide application at that R1 growth stage as being something else that you can do to improve yield potential on that dryland corn. So this gives you an overview of what we saw across those different seeding rates and for every single treatment, seeding rate by fungicide by nitrogen. But the average return, so for that fertilizer application, was $34 per acre, and the corn return was $39 per acre with $3.50. Excuse me. The fertilizer and application cost $34 per acre with the average return for applying that additional fertilizer of $39 per acre, assuming that you got $3.50 corn. The typical cost for that Delaro application was $22 per acre with the average yield or average net return of $26.95, assuming that you got $3.50 corn. So yields were improved by intensively managing dryland corn under these conditions. Definitely depends upon the growing conditions. Again, we got much different conditions in eastern Colorado versus, let's say, eastern Nebraska. And so understanding that, but again, if conditions improve in that eastern Colorado, western Kansas area, you could get additional increase in yield by looking at that V8 application of nitrogen or that R1 fungicide application of Delaro. So that gives you a brief overview of some of the research we did at the Learning Center in 2019 with respect to dryland management. Obviously, we hope you have a safe and productive growing season. Next time from the Learning Center. Thank you.
Thanks for watching this video from the Gothenburg Water Utilization Learning Center. For more information, please call 308-537-4500.